Welcome, everyone. I'm Sinquin Hawkins, a program director at IEEE Future Directions, and we are delighted to have you join us today for this 1-hour webinar on the topic of CityVerse. This is part of the IEEE Metaverse webinar series, which is organized by the IEEE Metaverse Initiative and IEEE Future Directions. We're really excited to have three presenters today, Roberto Saracco, Derrick the Kerckhove, and Daniela Tulone. Each will be providing their perspectives on the path toward a CityVerse. We will leave 10 minutes at the end for Q&A, so please post your questions using the Q&A feature. Please use the chat features if you have any technical issues. I will now turn this over to Roberto.
Thank you very much, Sinquin. And let me share my screen. Here we are. Okay, so what I'm planning to do is to share some ideas that have been evolving in the IEEE Metaverse group over this first year of studies. And we are using the word CityVerse. Actually, we've got it from the ITU, and Daniela can explain a bit more perhaps on why they call it CityVerse. But the idea is to merge this concept of city with the metaverse of a city. Now, my point is basically that we are going to evolve from the smart city to metaverse by having one convergence of two different metaverses. One is the consumer metaverse, and the other is the industrial metaverse. And through this presentation, I'm planning to explain why I think this is going to happen, and then provide some examples at the end. So, the consumer metaverse. You see, that's what you usually imagine about a metaverse. You've got a guy with this goggle. I don't understand why he's enjoying this kind of thing, but I guess younger people do. Well, it's excitement surely for a few. If you're looking at the data, market data, you see that it's an important area, but it's very, very limited. And mostly it's limited to gaming. Now, the question mark is this really a metaverse? Or is it just really a way of entering into a digital space, and that's it? Well, there are some games actually that are playing the metaverse in the sense of mixing together the physical and the digital. But most of this kind of thing, particularly when you have this kind of goggles that are bringing you directly into the digital space, I wouldn't consider that as a real metaverse. And probably these people are enjoying this because they are saying, dreams are my reality. And by stepping inside this digital world, you can just enact your dreams in a way. But on the other hand, the consumer metaverse is also providing you a way for bridging together the digital and the physical space through pervasive AR. And you see here in this image, a person that is looking at the Ueno station in downtown Tokyo, trying to find his way to the right train, and using the web as a support. So he's actually using digital information to get to the place he wants to. And this is a sort of metaverse, if you want, probably an even better approach to a metaverse than the one of gaming, because now you have the two work together. The industrial metaverse is actually a little bit of the reverse, because what people are in the industry, they are dreaming about reality. They want to build reality. And so they are using the digital space as a way to approach the reality that will be after the manufacturing process. And they're using digital twin as really as a dream for implementable future. They are describing what they have in mind, and then they're using the digital twin as a help in manufacturing this kind of thing. But also they're using digital twin as a mirror of reality. So they are using them to connect with reality. And in this sense, you can call the digital twin as a bridge between physical and digital. Now, the industrial metaverse as characteristics, you see, is implying some sort of synchronicity. You want the digital and the physical to be synchronous to one another. You want that once you're going back to the digital space, after a day of work, you come back to the office, you want to see the stuff that you did the previous day. So you want to have persistence in this kind of area. And therefore,
this thing is something that is really connecting much more to the idea of the
reality and the metaverse that has been developed within the FDC initiative. A digital reality is not digital, it's the new reality where we're going to live in. And that's partly made of physics, physical space, and partly made of digital space. So in this sense, the industrial metaverse today is the one that, according to our vision of the metaverse, is the closest one. And it's actually being used because it makes enterprise, it makes manufacturing much more efficient. So you can bet that it's going to evolve over time because of this interest. Money makes sense, you know, and so it's going to continue. Now, let's step back to the smart city. Okay, what is a smart city? Well,
for a smart city is a place where you're making the most of what you have, a city where you're making the most of what you have. When I'm talking to majors of city, they start by saying, oh, if only I have $1 billion, then I can make a smart city. But that's not about smart city. That's a rich city because you've got plenty of money. Being smart means to be able to use the resources you actually have today to the best effectiveness that you can actually have. And this is why more and more cities are moving
to what is called the digital transformation of the city. And you see there in the image is actually a sort of manifesto of the city of Singapore, where they are explaining to the community, to the citizenship, how Singapore is going to transition to the digital space, still remaining, of course, a physical space. So in their idea, they are putting together the data that are coming from the BIM, that all the construction data about the construction, roads, and so on, and those coming from CAD, computer-aided design, that are part of the infrastructure, the transportation, electrical power, and so on. They are partnering with several companies, and they are asking this company, I'm mentioning there Dassault, to really provide a digital twin of what they are building, what they are deploying. And they want to operate that part of infrastructure using the digital twin. They're also partnering with universities, like a joint cooperation between MIT and NSU, the National Singapore University, to build this CityVerse. And they actually are investing some $40 million US dollar to create a metaverse for the Changi Airport in Singapore, where you will have the experience of passenger going through the airport, but also workers in the airport, also pilots landing in Singapore, will be a mixture of the digital and the physical thing. So Singapore is a very nice example of an initiative toward the metaverse that is top-driven, so the municipality is taking responsibility as they should, but is also facing an environment, a citizenship that is ready to this kind of thing, okay? Because they have been prepared to this kind of evolution through the last 4 or 5 years. Now, if you're looking at the city and you're looking from the eye, from the standpoint of citizen, well, what you're looking for
to live well in that city, to get more opportunities from leveraging the city, so leveraging services, infrastructure, and so on. And basically what you're doing, you're living already in the physical space, and what you want to do is to get to the digital space to get more, to be able to do more, to understand more, to increase the value, okay? But from the administrative perspective, it's a little bit the other way around, because what they want to do, they want to create something in the physical space with the
resources being very, very effective. And in order to do that, they want to leverage on the digital space. So they build on the digital space and they pour what they have onto the physical space. So these two things go hand in hand, okay? Now, what is then a CityVerse from my perspective? Then Daniela will provide her perspective from the ITU perspective. Well, basically, we have this space that is composed of digital and physical. We have on one side the city, on the other side you have the people, the citizens, and they are connecting through digital twin and personal digital twin. And these over time, this kind of thing will get more and more inside this space. So today you're just having a part of it that is common, but most of it is outside. Well, in the evolution is to bring these two things that are still outside, to bring them inside till we reach a single perceived space where we can live. So by closing, let me give you a few examples in order, at least in my perception of order, how close they are to this idea of the CityVerse. We can start with London, when they have these several metaverses idea, and they have several players that have been developing this kind of thing. In the picture there, you see the London first augmented fashion presentation that was a mixture of fake, if you want, or digital and real. And people were there in that space, but through a sort of gimmick, to a trick that they're using in movies, the aim was, and to a certain extent they succeeded, to bring the people from the physical space where they were moving and sitting and to watch the performance into the digital space, so feeling as they were part of this digital space. And they did it by putting together the municipality, service provider, and advanced tech supplier to have this kind of movie-like experience. Another example is New York. And New York I would consider a little bit farther on than London in this sense, because they are already using Citizen as
a sensor network. In the image there, you see Berry Street in Brooklyn, and the tracking of what is happening in terms of traffic. This tracking is generated from sensors on people, and this means their smartphone, basically, and is analyzed through AI to create a map of what is going on. And they have this idea of urban digital twins that are basically capturing the meaning of what is going on in the city for simulation and for creating citizen awareness, so that people can refer to the urban digital twin to understand what's going on and what is the impact on me. A step on in this path would be Tokyo. And Tokyo has a plan to use extensively AR and VR, and their plan is a 10-year plan to be completed by 2030. And there are already some examples of this kind of thing, like the Digital Ueno Park project that you see there, and you can experience already today. The idea here is that you can see and you can walk virtually through this park, okay? But this is not really different from what we have had for several years, because for several years we had the opportunity of looking something, okay, from the real world and experiencing it, something like that. What's the difference here? Well, the difference here is that you can invite friends and you can say, let's meet in the Ueno Park. And it doesn't matter whether you are in Osaka at that particular time and your friend is in Hokkaido. You can still have a meeting in the Ueno Park. So basically what happened is that you can send your digital twin in the Ueno Park, in digital Ueno Park, your friend is doing the same thing, and these two digital twins are there to interact one another, and you can, in a way, control this digital twin from Osaka or from Hokkaido, okay? So there's this kind of synchronicity that is, in a way, in a middle space between the gaming and the industrial metaverse. Another example is Seoul, where municipality commitment of creating this CityVerse, they have already invested $3 million for a Seoul digital twin, and they open up the CityVerse in 2022, and they are performing this Seoul Lantern Festival today. Okay, it's actually running. You can see it from your place. It's running from November 6th to November 17th. So you have the opportunity after we are finished this webinar to go to Seoul and enjoy this Lantern Festival directly from your web. And the idea here is that the Seoul municipality is supporting citizens to create their own citizen personal digital twin. So actually what you're going to see there is not just a representation like you see in a movie, but you're going to see people in Seoul mirrored by their digital twin, and you can interact with them. So I would rather consider this as a more advanced kind of CityVerse. And the last example is the one of Dubai Metaverse. They set up a metaverse strategy. What you see there is the Museum of the Future that is also the location of the Dubai Metaverse Assembly. So they create an organism that is actually ruling over this Dubai metaverse. And by 2030, they are expecting to create 40,000 jobs in this metaverse for the metaverse. So these are only the jobs that relate to the CityVerse. And they are planning to attract 1,000 companies, again, working on the metaverse and for the metaverse. And this should add some $4 billion to the GDP of Dubai. It has been activated end of 2022. I'm actually going to see that hands-on next February. I'm planning to be there. I already have contact, and I can report perhaps in the next webinar what's really is going on there. Well, so to close, let me say that today we live in a digital world, okay, and we are separated for this world. However, I'm feeling, and I'm pretty sure you are feeling, completely immersed, okay? This is our world. We're living here. But whenever I'm trying to go to the web to look at something and so on, it's very clear that it's me here and the web is out there. So there's a separation. Well, in the future, our idea of the metaverse is the one that also when we're going to interact with the web, we are feeling as part of that, like it is part of our world. So the question now is, yes, technically, probably we can do that, but are we sure we want to get there? And this is a question for Derrick that will address now the sociological aspects of the thing. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Roberto, for your great talk, and also for saving me time, because you added so many suggestions regarding citizen participation in the city. You also added the augmented reality dimension, which I'm not really studying here, and I feel sorry for that because it's really valuable. Before I get into my argument, I'd like to suggest a few other ideas about citizen participation that came to mind. The city as metaverse can provide entertainment, but as a city digital twin, it's geared towards pragmatic rather than playful participation. By removing temporal and spatial obstacles, the metacity can more easily attract public consultation. By offering the ability to instantly see the virtual realization of any building of landscaping initiative in its context, it facilitates decision-making. By bringing the city government and the citizens together in consultation, it reinforces commitment to collaborations and ownership. Even as citizens begin to develop their personal digital twins, these may eventually support their agenda at the city council. The end result may be that the citizenry eventually regains a long-lost sense of civic sensitivity. Getting a sense of your city as a whole, seen from the outside, as it were, invites a new perspective on it. It expands and unifies the imagination of the citizens, increasing the sense of belonging. It enables real-time and real-place monitoring of municipal services. It facilitates simulation, placement of new roads, and construction. It also attracts new possibilities for tourism and cultural events. It can also encourage new investment from within and abroad. By creating twin functional spaces in different cities, the metacity or the cityverse can also stimulate new uses for existing offerings. For example, I've imagined a restaurant, coffee shops, franchise around the world providing the same decor or theme-driven ones that would facilitate global encounters, even offering deeply private rooms shielded from cookies and other tracing or spying technologies. They would be situated in an instantly recognizable area that patrons could walk out into as avatars, or just as they are. We can imagine Sotheby, for example, expanding its auctions globally by making people share the same room but in different cities. We can imagine hospital bedrooms for people to share bedside manners with distant relatives. But of course, when early January 2022, I introduced the concept of MetaCity at a previous IEEE Digital Reality Initiative webinar, it got a rather lukewarm reception. Everybody was still bewildered by the metaverse opportunities. I gave more or less the same talk January 17 to 100 EU or European Union administrators. And that could be the way the concept was picked up by the EU and was rebaptized CityVerse, a much better name for what I had predicted would be the ultimate destiny of the metaverse technology. At the time, doing my research online, I found only one reference to the word metacity, a long paper not related at all to the metaverse, but to massive agglomerations of urban settlements incorporating erstwhile neighboring towns and cities. I was spurred on to that research because I couldn't believe that there would be any future better than that of Second Life to the land grabbing and other money-making proposition of the likes of Mark Zuckerberg and his cohorts. This expensive toyland disappointed Zuckerberg himself, who confessed his dismay upon visiting Horizon. There's nobody there, he said. Land is, of course, here the operative word in any metaverse initiative. It's all about land. And this is for a unique technical reason. The fact that whatever you call it, the metaverse is here to stay for the long, maybe the indefinite term. Of all the 7 characteristics listed by Roberto Saracco, the one that sticks is persistence. Both Zuckerberg and Matthew Ball, one of the better philosophers of the metaverse, said as much in their own way. We get accessibility, immersion, synchronicity, decentralization, interoperability, economics, and all that elsewhere, but only in the metaverse and its predecessors, such as Active Worlds, one of the first, or Second Life, and a few more, we can go back to the place and find it more or less the same, except for surface modification in the interim. A special case must be made for the specific metaverse immersion because although present in Second Life and others, it is only by proxy, that is, avatars, not in virtual body. In the metaverse, you're there, almost as literally as you're here. What all this amounts to is a new form of colonization that hasn't been named that way before, the colonization of virtual space. Although the practice of colonizing the internet has begun since its earliest beginning, it never was quite the same thing as taking over its genuinely spatial properties. And while even Toyland, that is the sum of all the entertainment initiatives excluding the industrial use of the metaverse, well explained by Roberto, that is a form of land grabbing. Toyland is just basically getting more land, and it can dispense with the regulation. But CityVerse cannot. The reason it can dispense, at least for the while, with serious regulation is that it's virgin territory. But the CityVerse is not virgin territory, it's actually a real place, duplicated. But in my first presentation, I hazarded a few tentative suggestions about what rule of thumb should be considered if and when the concept would be applied to real cities. Let me quote myself. General rules. 1. The metacity is a public space occupied as such by all citizens, either as themselves, avatars, digital twins, or visitors. 2. Citizens can propose changes to building, roadways, public artwork, services, etc., but must obtain City Council permission to simulate them for approval in the context they have selected. Ownership. Free access and use to owners and renters. Possibility to acquire property, but only as a reflection, that is a virtualization of a physical acquisition. You can't buy somebody else's house in virtual form, which just creates problems. Possibility to buy, arrange, and furnish one's apartment or house in the meta city. I imagine, in fact, that people would actually want to have, dinners, international, global dinners with people in their own house. Laws applying to public behavior in the physical city apply to the meta city. E.g., theft of property, break-in and entry, all of these things are punished by law. There are many, many uses that one could imagine for that sort of situation. And I think it's one which will create a whole lot of new jobs. Let's say a specific formation should be considered for technological expertise, data analysts, architects, infrastructure managers, system specialists, surveillance managers, facility providers, police and law enforcers, and protection from cyber attacks. And also for educational use. I've always wondered if one could get the students of schools or the pupils of school to actually pay attention to the more difficult areas without having to go there and get to know them and get to know what the condition of other people's life was. And so this is another educational use that one we could consider. Now, let's think about what is implied in colonizing virtual of any kind of persisting space. The matter has come under serious revision, not only in academia, but also in governments that are piling up over each other in their rush to profess apologies and mea culpas about past criminal behavior, sometime 200 years ago, of their respective countries. Do we want to risk the same mistakes about the CityVerse? The very first rule is to respect the land and the people who are thus being invaded. This doesn't apply to Roblog or Decentraland, areas that occupied a previously radically virgin territory, and that in spite of paying lip service to a mythical single metaverse. They are really private properties. It applies absolutely to a cityverse. Duplicating a city in virtual form at whatever level of granularity or definition is duplicating real estate in every sense of the word. There should be no operative distinction between physical and virtual property, except that the virtual city as a whole and all its functionalities should be public domain, whereas individual housing and businesses, once virtualized and duly respecting regulations, could fall under the jurisdiction pertaining to physical real estate. Respecting the land in the case of the cityverse means respecting the features and the proportion of the city being virtualized, just as Google Maps reflects photographically the disposition of the city and the authentic character of Street View. The metaverse difference with Google is, of course, the immersion and the synchronic interactivity enabled by metaverse technologies, whether that involves a headset or goggles or not. I believe that most users, notwithstanding the attractiveness of the promised Apple glasses, expensive things, will feel perfectly comfortable using any variety of screens. It is clear that the issue of granularity is to be raised. The finer the detail, the more weight it will be put on programming, processing, and distribution. This will depend on how the technology evolves. But one standard that should be respected is that whatever definition is reached, even minimally as block figures, buildings and their surroundings should remain proportionately the same as their models. To demonstrate how this can be done with real buildings, I've asked my design students at Politecnico di Milano to virtualize the famous Gallery of Milan. And now let me share my screen so that we can see the work done by my students. It's one of 5 projects which are working at presenting different kinds of use of a cityverse idea using real places in Milano. And this is the first one. That's the one that's most advanced. We're still half term, so there's still a lot of work to do. So my students are on the right. It's called the CityVerse project. And so what is a cityverse? It's the application of metaverse technologies to virtualize real cities. Well, the Global Village Square is actually a long story because about 30 years ago, the McLuhan program, of which I was a director, acquired with a lot of good help from Picturetel company, a video conferencing system that allowed me, because I was traveling a lot, to give my classes the way we do now naturally, but at that time was really unique, to give my classes from various parts of the world. And among the things we wanted to do was to create this place that you could put in a park or you could put in a building. And in this case, we did actually have an invitation by the culture counselor of Milan to occupy one of the offices belonging to the city in the gallery of Milan. And so we then found a place in Toronto. We found everything we needed except the money because it was expensive. The Picturetel itself wasn't keen on doing it again in another country. They said, if you want to do it with the system we've already given you. So we didn't get the money and it never happened, but the idea stuck, and it stuck because, of course, it was so much McLuhan. Here, for example, you can read, as electrically contracted, the globe is no more than a village. Electric speed in bringing all social and political functions together in a sudden implosion has heightened human awareness of responsibility to an intense degree. So we actually created the McLuhan Foundation, and among our projects is to create a physical gathering place in Toronto that would also house a dynamic museum and would have global connections thanks to now the real thing, the Global Village Square. And of course, the difference between what it would cost today and what it would cost then is like incredible. So the idea now is feasible, and of course we hope it will happen, and who knows, maybe we can actually do it with my students' work. So that's the thing. The place is called the Salotto di Milano. I wish I could show it to you, but the students didn't know where it was. There's really many advantages to the project. Besides being a sort of a pilot project, we can visit the Galleria without having to go there. We could meet people from around the world because it's one of the most famous places in Milano. We can explore the Galleria in its historical periods. I didn't even know that. The students got that for me, that the gallery had actually 4 different times when it was built, from the center outwards, and so forth. Here are the fourth wings that are described. You can see that it's quite an elaborate building. And so you have the first section, the foundation in 1877. You have then a second and a third wing. All these wings are described here. And then, of course, the finished work is 2015. And it becomes, for us, it would be the open gateway to the metaverse, or in this case, the CityVerse. We use these tools, the students use these tools, the Blender, which is very well known, Unity, they're all very well known, Unity and Spatial I/O. Remember, my students are design students, so for them, this was practically their daily experience. This is what they describe how they worked on it. The 3D modeling requires gathering the photo for reference, modeling the element that is going to be repeated, mirroring the element that's going to be repeated, and then build an array of a succession of these elements so that you can actually save a lot of in programming time and design time. And so here's the effect. This is actually very much part of how the gallery is built. It's one of the aisles. And so the next thing is then to put the functionalities of interactivity in it, and then, decide how we're going to use it. Whether we're finished with the project completely, I'm not sure. But I can say that I'm extremely happy about them doing it, and I'm very, very proud of them, and I thank them here publicly. And now I would like to give the talk to Daniela Tulone, who is going to talk about how this can be done, for the public. Okay.
Good morning and good evening to all of you. So I will share now my presentation. Okay, so I'll talk about CityVerse from a different perspective, the perspective of sustainability. So CityVerse is often presented as an opportunity for cities to actually reimagine cities in a more inclusive, sustainable, and resilient way. And in fact, there are several opportunities that the metaverse offer for cities. We heard in the Roberto and Derrick presentation, for instance, in the health sector, mobility, but also in the public administration through smart contracts, virtual administration hub, and so on. But the sustainability of the CityVerse cannot be reduced to just only to the development of innovative applications, even though, this is a very important aspect, especially in this early stage of the CityVerse. It is paramount to analyze in depth the opportunities, sustainability opportunities of the CityVerse, together with its inherent limitation, cost, and sustainable environmental, social, and economic risk. Some of these sustainable risks are inherited from the metaverse enabling technologies such as AI, blockchain. For instance, a concern is regards the risk of increasing CO2 emission instead of cutting, because a metaverse is highly energy and resource efficient, but also the risk of increasing e-waste and the demand of rare materials and the indirect impact on the biodiversity and the ecosystem because of the rapid growth of infrastructure. But these are not the only concern, because others regards people, community, such as the risk of amplified discrimination, manipulation, disinformation, mental health issues that have been on the rise with the pandemic. For instance, the risk of a feeling of isolation, disconnection with the reality, disengagement, and so on. So this is not to diminish the value of the CityVerse, but actually to have a wide, complete vision in order to design an effective tool that is sustainable. So in this phase, it's important to set priorities for this development, and especially priorities align with the city priorities, and to contextualize, because each city is different, and within a specific context to evaluate pros and cons. And a systemic approach is fundamental in this analysis of the potential environmental, social, and sustainable system impact, or CityVerse impact. But also it's very important to analyze the interconnection between these components, because they are strictly related. For instance, even designing an application that focuses on cutting CO2 emission, we will get indirect consequences on the social components or economic, that can be very good, very positive, or also detrimental. So it's important to analyze this aspect in the big picture. Just to give an example, reimaging activities now through virtual spaces are known to be an opportunity not to cut CO2 emissions. But I mean, we cannot take that for granted, because we need to analyze also the other environmental components. Before I mentioned about e-waste and indirect CO2 emissions, but also we need to question about the readiness of people, communities, not to embrace and to benefit from these technologies, the business activities, but also the convenience, because we need to question about the convenience of developing a certain type of application, CityVerse application, with respect to other, because we have limited resources. And I'm not talking just about physical resources, but also time, effort. And also we know that CityVerse can enforce, can strengthen the citizen engagement. But it's important to ask who will benefit from this CityVerse application, because sometimes we assume the best scenario, no? Fast performance, connection, and pervasive devices. But in many cases, the reality of cities is different. For instance, during the lockdown, there was an increased dropout of school dropout, because students couldn't attend remotely classes, because in some disadvantaged conditions, because they didn't have devices, a computer, a laptop, or even a smartphone. So we needed to take into consideration the current assumption in order to plan the future, no? So sustainability has two comprise of two parts that are strongly interconnected, and they support each other. So on one side, we need to develop a new innovative application, CityVerse application, that are geared towards the SDGs. And there are promising sectors such as education, health, and so on, city planning. But these applications won't be actually effective if they are not sustainable by themselves. So sustainable from the economic, social, and environmental viewpoint. So this part of the side of the coin has received lots of attention, while the other side, the sustainability of the CityVerse, but also the sustainability of Metaverse or AI system, has received little attention. And it comprises of two parts. On one side, we need to enhance the system sustainability impact, and the other side mitigate and manage and also communicate inherent drawbacks, inherent limitation and cost. And as I mentioned earlier, this aspect has received a little attention, and also sometimes there is no clear definition of sustainability. It's often intended in terms of energy efficiency, also because energy efficiency is part of the computer, is one of the computer research topic. But we need to combine these two sides of the coin, and I'm working actually on both. And in the past few years, I've been focusing on the sustainability of AI and Metaverse. So, but how to make these applications sustainable? Well, the best place is by design, because we have lots of higher degree of freedom. But moving sustainable consideration at the early stage of the technical design actually implies a change in the design approach and expansion, because the common design approach focuses on technical challenges, and usually the sustainability aspect are left for later stages. So, but this approach, this sustainable design actually brings lots of many opportunities. For instance, the opportunity to increase the impact of the system, and to make the system more robust, resilient, and also to reduce the probability of occurrence of side effects after the deployment at additional cost. But clearly, implementing a sustainable design approach is complex, require a systemic approach, active cross-sector collaboration, and so on. So I'm working on facilitating this transition through metrics, indicators, guidelines, and methodologies. So I'm doing this also within the ITU, the focus group on the Metaverse. And I launched a task group on the sustainability of the Metaverse by design. Task group are actually groups of open groups of experts. And so if you are interested, please contact me, you are welcome. And this task group comprise of 3 phases. In the first phase, that we set the foundation for a sustainable metaverse, and then also define criteria for a sustainable design and the system requirements. So this phase ended in September, and we define the first technical specification for a sustainable metaverse. So this is a pre-standardization work that is likely to go to the next stage to become an official document. Well, it is already, but to be adopted, hopefully. So the other phases regard the definition of metrics and indicators to evaluate the sustainability of the system during the design in order to adjust and to improve it, and also incentives to foster this sustainable development of the CityVerse and Metaverse. So I'm also contributing to the EU roadmap on the CityVerse. And in general, before I think Derrick mentioned about the need to set a regulation, I think at this stage, I see more urgent to set guidelines. And I think that probably regulation will be very useful at a later stage. And in general, what I notice in not only in this policy work, but also in other, is that very often we focus on the technical aspects, and we put in a secondary floor, I mean, the human decision, while these are the most important part. And this is because it's very complex to implement a sustainable transition. And every time that we start working on this, we realize that each stakeholder must give up with something, but there is no other way to do. And actually, I think that we should highlight the new opportunities, what we can gain from this new approach. So I want just to show you the definition that we include in the technical specification of a sustainable metaverse, because it can be useful also for the CityVerse. So a metaverse ecosystem is sustainable if address present environmental and social challenges without compromising the needs of the future generation. This is resemble the traditional definition of sustainability. And also has to harness the benefits for the environment and all stakeholders, preventing harm and mitigating the inherent limitation and the side effect that cannot be removed. So it's important to distinguish between harm and unintended consequences that must be mitigated, managed, and communicated. So this definition has several implications for the design. For instance, a responsible choice of the problem to tackle. So it's important to prioritize environmental and social challenges, but also in the case in which we are building a system that doesn't directly address those challenges, it's important to work to harness the sustainability system impact. And also for all of the metaverse application, in particular CityVerse, it's fundamental to augment human capabilities and to highlight the uniqueness of a human being, foster growth and real collaboration. Otherwise, we risk really to increase those risks that I mentioned earlier. No, And also, it's important to build a system on top of green technologies and energy efficiency practices, best practices. We in the document we define some of them, and focus not only on short-term perspective, no, but having also a medium and long-term perspective, thinking, for instance, about the questioning about the sustainability of the system scalability. And trustworthiness is fundamental, no, for the sustainable CityVerse. So this is a summary of the criteria that we define: sustainable responsible problem selection and system impact, but also alignment with the AI ethics principle and the responsible design. But also resource efficiency plays a very important role with the recyclability, reusability of hardware, software, and data. And the criteria of proportionality says that the resources allocated to a system must be proportional to the system purpose and also to the system benefits. So we provided also several guidelines to reduce CO2 emissions. And I want just to add something about the inclusion, which is a very important aspect. So it's important when designing systems, CityVerse, for instance, application, to provide a lightweight version of the system. Otherwise, we risk to cut out some, communities and areas. So regarding the responsible choice of the problem. In this, we are in a phase in which we are developing use cases. So instead of starting from the technologies and try to finding application that leverage, that make those technologies key, we should actually start from the compelling problems of cities, such as city resiliency, social gaps, education, even opportunities, and many other. And then see how the enabling technologies of Metaverse can support the solution of these problems. So in conclusion, it's very important to have a strategic planning and development of the CityVerse, and to combine CityVerse, work on CityVerse for SDGs and sustainable CityVerse by setting priorities and allocating resources in a responsible way. And we can do this in a systemic approach, through active cross-sector collaboration. And of course, there are many open issues, but I think it's important to harmonize a short-term and a medium and long-term perspective and take courageous steps. I was very surprised to read in the EU special report published last May that only 12% of targets for the 2030 are on track. So that means that we don't have time and resources to waste. So we need to be very focused, especially on the development of the CityVerse. So with this, I conclude my talk, and I look forward for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniela. So let's bring all of our speakers back on. Roberto and Derrick. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to use the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen to submit your questions. We have several questions. We have about 5 minutes, so I will just poll a couple of them. Let's start with this one. And this is more of a technical question. Will Metaverse be pervasive without 6G? And the key aspect to that is, delay can certainly kill the applications and the user experience as well. Would any one of you like to take that?
Okay, I'll take it. Well, Gustavo, let me tell you this: 7G will be much better, but it will be very poor with respect to 8G. I mean, evolution will continue over time, okay? And we shouldn't wait a single day for the 6G and even for the 5G to start working and develop services with what we have available. We've got plenty of technology available. We've got plenty of processing capability. We've got software that can enable rendering. Now we have conversational AI. There's plenty of technology that we can use today. So the problem is how to use what we have at best. There's no point in waiting for 6G, and I would say there's no point in waiting for 5G. The kind of latency that you gain in using 5G is actually being destroyed by the fact that you also have other networks, and 5G is going across several other networks. And besides, once you have a metaverse, the metaverse is shrinking the whole world onto a single square. But the whole world is pretty big. So if you got a person in New Zealand, it doesn't really matter whether that person is using 5G or 10G, okay? The electromagnetic signal from New Zealand to Cupertino and then back to Italy takes 12 milliseconds, okay? And there's no number of G that can solve this kind of thing. So we've got to live with the physical limitation, and we got to make the most of what we have. I wouldn't be concerned about 6G or what can come with that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Roberto.
Like
Go ahead, Daniela, go ahead.
To add something. So actually in my presentation, I address a little bit this issue, the ethical, because sustainability actually embrace cannot be built unless we build on ethical principles, responsible design, but also the inclusive aspect. Inclusivity includes also this aspect, how to provide a lightweight version, and also don't assume only certain type of technologies, like even 5G in Africa, for instance. I mean, in many cases you don't get this.
All right, thank you. And maybe I'm just going to expand a little bit on the ethical issues. Privacy and security is always a key question that we have, especially when a lot of data is collected, especially when we have both our physical presence and we also have a virtual presence online somewhere. Can one of you speak to the challenges and what we can do to overcome some of these challenges?
Well, I can. It's one of the things that I've been sort of researching. The augmentation of data grabbing from any situation in a metaverse, whether it's a CityVerse or a standard metaverse, is enormous, because every move can be traced. Every posture and gait can be associated with a specific person. And there are all kinds of problems. The major problem, my feeling, is that we are entering a culture where privacy is really not feasible anymore. It was born in a previous culture, and we are entering in one where we are traced all the time in every way. Zuckerberg said, get over it. I don't think that's enough. one has to understand that we have to see how a human can continue being without a privacy. Many cultures don't have privacy. It was invented in the West. The kind of privacy we have, it was invented in the West, but the West is not the West anymore. The West now is digital. The West is algorithmic. And these things simply do not, they can't even be really ruled. There can't be regulations about it because you can turn around it all the time. So we have to get over it means learn about it, learn about what we can be without privacy. I know it's a silly proposition, but it's not a cop-out. We have to deal with the information about us and how to actually manage all these things. It's not by controlling what can be taken or not be taken from the metaverse, because you can't control that. We have to change.
Can
So,
I?
Go ahead, please jump in.
Okay, I don't agree on this. I think that we should try our best to ensure privacy, because in the ideal world, it might be okay to lose privacy because there were no harm to and harmful consequences. But in the real world, actually there are, and so I mean, we need to try our best. Even though I agree with you that actually we are losing more and more in terms of privacy, confidentiality, but we cannot give up.
No,
I know we kind
understand
of running.
too.
We're running out of time. I know we passed a couple minutes past the top of the hour. I'm just going to ask one more question. This actually question is directly to you, Derrick. If you could elaborate more on how the space acquisition could work in Metaverse, similar land acquisition in real world, as digital space can be infinite, or official Metaverse spaces could be visualized or integrated with current development. It's a mouthful. Hopefully you can see the question on the screen as well. Derrick, could you address that question?
Yes, thank you for it. My concern was that if we are dealing with space that we can return to and that we can occupy, and physically we occupy these new spaces, this virtual space, then they follow some of the conditions of experience and consequently of duties and obligation and privileges and benefits that we have in the real space. If that's the case, and that's why I made a difference between the Roblox and Decentraland and all the things that we have been exposed to, and CityVerse. CityVerse is real space. The respect of real space in virtual space, in that case, according to me, is essential. The respect that I see is that, and I said, at any level of granularity, one should respect it. So if you don't have enough computing power to represent perfectly well the Galleria that we have seen, you should be able to recognize the basic shapes and the proportions between that building and the other buildings. I think if you let's say that you occupy an apartment in Milano and you want to invite people there and set a table for them, coming from anywhere in the world, which is something I've always imagined, because that's your private property, you can do whatever you want with that space. But when you're dealing with public property, you can't. And that was the point that of bringing up a thematics of regulation. I do agree with Daniela, we have to have guidelines before regulations. But at the same time, we should also consider that I have never seen anybody talk about space as visual space as real estate, except by people who are making money and selling it. And in fact, the price per square meter in Decentraland rose by something like 20 times within 3 months. So you can see that the idea of buying space is the same as the idea of buying space in the real world. That's why I think regulations concerning the use of virtual space that corresponds to a city should actually be considered.
Thank you, Derrick. We are at 5 past the hour. I just want to give each presenter a chance to kind of say just a few words before we wrap up.
Okay, thank you, Cinquen, and thanks to all that attended this thing. I just want to say two things. First, I sympathize with Daniela, but I think that Derrick is right. Second, we will need probably different webinar to address more the ethical question. I didn't mention the concept of frame, that is very important in the industrial metaverse, and that I think has a lot to do with addressing, not solving, but addressing issues of privacy in the CityVerse. Thank you.
And I want to thank Roberto, take my side on the argument with Daniela, but at the same time, I want to thank him for having included very forcefully the augmented reality dimension. It requires rethinking a lot of my own ideas about it, because the mixing, the hybridity of it is actually extremely useful and extremely interesting. So I'll go back to the drawing board.
You muted, Daniela.
As a final note, I think that sustainability can be a driver for the CityVerse. I didn't get the one of the question, but yeah, of course this is something new, and so it discloses many open issues, but innovation, it's about these addressing open issues, and finding new opportunities.
Well, I just want to thank you again to all three excellent presentations from our speakers. I want to invite you to visit us on metaversereality.ieee.org for upcoming events. We will be having an event coming up on December 6th, where we will actually kind of experiment, and the whole webinar, the whole event will be in an immersive environment within the Frame VR environment that will allow up to 300 avatars. So it's an experience in itself in terms of whether we as users will adapt to, for example, attend a meeting fully virtual in an immersive environment. So please look for upcoming information on that from our website. And again, thank you for joining us, and have a great day.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.